Hi everyone, this is Ryan and this is lesson 4 of working with JavaScript. In this lesson we'll be learning about functions. I'm starting with a script tag to link to an external document. I also have a empty div tag where I can put some output to the screen. In my JavaScript file I have a standard init function and it loads once the document is finished loading. Let's start with some rules with regard to how to define a function. I'm using JavaScript comments to take some notes. So, step 1, no spaces are allowed in your function names. So, I can't have a function called greetMe. I can, however, use an underscore character to represent the space. Alternatively, I could capitalize the second word, the first letter of the second word. No starting with a number. That would be illegal, but you may use numbers anywhere else in the function name. No reserved words. For example, JavaScript has a list of words within the language itself. Example, function. So you can't say function. No punctuation marks. Except for the underscore. So obviously you cannot use any of these. Right, let's begin by writing a function called greet. I want to be able to display some text in my block. So I'm just going to say hello. I'm also going to put a plus equals because I want to call this function multiple times. So we call the function greet. I'm just going to call it twice. The whole point of a function is that you can reuse your code. So the code that's between the opening curly bracket and the closing curly bracket can be reused just simply by calling the function as many times as you need it. One problem that we have here is that we're using a variable that will be non-existent. I've declared the variable inside the init function, but it's not automatically available to me in the greet function. The reason for this is because this is known as a local variable. Local variable means that it's only accessible in the function it was declared in. So what I need to do to solve this problem is make it a global variable. To make it a global variable, I declare it outside of the function. Obviously then I can't declare it twice. So this is now no longer a local variable, but rather a global variable. Okay, so remember, creating a variable is a two-step process. You first declare it, and then you initialize it. The advantage of having it as a global variable is that I can actually use it in other functions as well. Okay, let us run our code. We're going to a web browser. I'm going to open up lesson4.html, and there you can see it's printed the word hello twice. Alright, so now I'm going to enhance this function a little bit by sending it a parameter or an argument. An argument is basically a variable that you send to a function. We can then substitute that into our sentence in the function. But now when we call the function, we need to actually send a value to that function. So the first time I call the greet function, a string of Mary will be sent up and stored in the name variable. it will then be substituted into my sentence. So it should say hello Mary. The second time I call the function, the string of Ryan will be sent up to the name variable, and it should then say hello Ryan. And there we have it. You can add more than one argument. In fact, you can add as many as you wish. So I'll add an age. Because I'm expecting two arguments or two values to be sent to the function, I now need to send two values in both cases. And those values will be comma separated, both in the argument list and also when you call the function. Okay, so you can see that the arguments really enhance the functionality of the function. It allows you to customize what the function does. There's always going to be a certain pattern to a function. That's the reason why we build it into a function. It's a pattern is something that repeats itself, but within that pattern there are also things that are going to be different. For example, the name and the age. And so for those things that are different, we just simply use arguments or variables that we send to the function. A function can also return a value. So that means that instead of outputting the value directly from the function, we can say return and just send the string back to where it was called. So return simply takes the value that you're returning and substitutes it at the point where the function was called. So that means that at this point we are no longer outputting anything to the screen. So we need to actually do this at the point where we call the function. So first the greet function will execute. The greet function will make some substitutions, send the string or the sentence back to the point where the function was called, and then obviously that text will then be inserted into the div tag by using the inner HTML property. Okay, so if I run this now, I should only get one sentence. To get the other sentence, I will need to also output it. Plus equals meaning I'm going to append to the end of the existing div tag. Let us run it again. There we have it. And one final thing I would like to talk about with regard to functions is the concept of an anonymous function. An anonymous function is a function that does not have a name. So you can see onLoad equals init waits for the document to load and then calls the init function, which then executes. So this is only ever going to run once, so I may as well create it as an anonymous function. So that would look like this. You would say function bracket bracket and open curly brackets and close curly brackets. And then the contents of the old init function will cut and will paste into the anonymous function. And now we can actually do away completely with the init function. Right, so the way this works is you can see that this function does not have a name. Normally you'd actually give it a name. But we just put the brackets directly after the word function, meaning it's an anonymous function. So once the document is loaded, the contents of this block of code will execute immediately. It will only ever happen once, so there's no need to give this function a name. I'm not going to have to call it multiple times. Let's test if it still works. Yeah, it still works correctly. Saves a little bit of coding. So this ends our lesson on functions.